exist to defend the rights of the players. This is done to ensure that those that have retired are also assisting the current players. It's always good when you've got people who are dealing with those matters at the board level, because whole purpose of having union is to ensure that workers' rights are protected and you serve their interests to the best of their ability. If we start to really build these players, and enhance them with the necessary information, we empower them so that when they get to the higher level, they already are members of the organization. It makes the work much more better.
Well, here we are, our first episode for 2025, Behind the Boot with Super Journal. My first guest, Secretary General of the South African Football Players Union. I dragged him in here kicking and screaming, and I know it's going to be a good one as we delve into disputes, players' welfare, and a whole lot more.
Negotiations, and in terms of the players' contracts, we deal with the disciplinary hearings in relation to that. And negotiating for the collective in relation to the collective bargaining agreement, ensuring that the conditions of employment are in order, the players are paid salaries on time, there's just respect towards the game, but also to educate the players, skill them, to ensure that we prepare them for the next phase of their lives as they transition to life after football. So the work that we do encompasses a lot. It's not only about the fights, but it's also about capacity building, with the members, because we want to have future administrators in the game, and when you speak of the phrase that says nothing must happen for us without us, I think that's where we took it into a broader perspective to say that if football is run by footballers, I think a lot of things can change and get better from where they are, but we must encourage them to at least, navigate themselves to ensure that we take up those positions and lead football the way we ought to. So it's a lot here, but that's more or less what we do. The aim is to enterprise.
What I like about SAFPU is that, a lot of the head honchos of the if you look at who SAFPU are, the president, the SG, and so on and so forth, it's former players as well. Was that just a coincidence that it's former players? Because you speak of a transition, it's necessary to understand where the players are coming from as well, to have both sides instead of, there's a lot of criticism sometimes about people who are administrators not having been in those boots in the past.
I think it's how it is designed. Because if you are in a sector and you want to improve the situation, you need those that would have participated in the structures. But very importantly, you need those that are still participating and active. That is why in all unions, you've got worker leaders. In the traditional sense of a union, you have those who work in the mines, but who also belong to the structures of the board or the national office bearers, as we call it, just like SAFPU has players within the structure. And this is done to ensure that those that have retired are also assisting the current players, for a transitioning phase, because we must always talk about the succession plan. And if these things are not really workshopped through the years, then we leave the unions in a crisis whereby when the leadership that has been at the helm for a number of years vacates those positions, sometimes you don't have people who are capable to really carry on with the agenda. So it's a perpetual, educational program. But the importance of having players just as much as former players. I'm going to just take this out of context from the football perspective. Let us say we are a union that deals with the mine workers, right? And the workers who work underground, they complain about the conditions, that it's too hot, ventilation is very necessary, and probably their PPE, or including boots, let's say they are very, very headful and they have spikes inside. Those complaints are genuine for those who are facing that particular situation. But now let's just look at the union having a composition of former players only. It will be easy for us to simply say, no, these people are crazy. They complain a lot. We also worked when it was hot. We also wore those
under even worse conditions.
Yes, under worse conditions. And we are here today and we are alive. They must just maintain and sustain. But it's always good when you've got people who are dealing with those matters at the board level, because whatever it is that is presented, it's based on the life experience. These are real life issues that we talk about. So it balances the scenario. It also ensures that we police each other in terms of the things that we have to do.
So it's not just a cabal of former players deciding to form a union.
Yeah, I think it will be a problem, because then we will not relate with the current issues on the ground. I mean, if I retired in 2002, I understand football from that perspective. So within
but a lot has changed as well.
So within the board discussions, we need the current players who are going to at least bring the reality of the situation that they face and also propose solutions, because they know better the struggle and they experience it on a daily basis. So I think that works hand in hand, and it assists to ensure that the union services the workers, because the whole purpose of having union is to ensure that workers' rights are protected and you serve their interests to the best of their ability.
Do you then go around to various clubs, whether professional ranks or amateur ranks, selling your vision as SAFPU to? How do they sign up? Essentially, that's what I'm asking, because you get varying information as to why a certain player is part of SAFPU, and others just prefer a lawyer or their agents to deal with any sort of issues or contract related matters that they have.
We have ongoing recruitment and educational drives. I mean, the CBA that has come into place assisted us a lot in this, because the league also understand that our aim is to build, the players. And if we all contribute, the clubs and the SAFPU, in building this brand that is a footballer, ensuring that we have the most powerful, 21st century footballers, who are innovative in the way that they think and conscientized, on a number of things. We're building leaders. It's very encouraging and motivating. And I mean, based on the responsibilities that we have, it is well aligned with building the brand that is the PSL and ensuring that it is stronger. And we do it through the members, because both parties have an interest within the players. And we would then request to meet with the players. We write letters to the clubs and informing them that we want to come through at this particular date, and these are the issues that the union wants to really look at and discuss. It varies. Sometimes it's financial literacy. It could be the issue of the pension fund or the sports tax aspect that we firmly believe needs to really be relooked at by the government and even the private sector. Those grades can come through and contribute in building the brand. But it emanates from that. And the reception from the teams, I must say that it has greatly improved, because the majority of the clubs we are able to see, even though there is still, a bit of resistance that we feel from some of the teams. And maybe it's because they are not informed. But the strategy that we've also taken.
Banana litolwana.
So, at least we... Now that the doors are open and the relations are better, we're able to also meet with the chairmen and sell them the idea and also express on what is it that we deliver as the union, which makes them to be at ease, based on contrary to the previous understanding of the union's function. So that's exactly where we go in and we tap in and we talk about the football agenda insofar as the players are concerned. And in some sessions, some team management would request to stay. I mean, it's also good for them to be educated on some of the issues, but we do have the closed doors private sessions where we
so that the players can be able to be transparent as well. How's the ratio in terms of the numbers picking up when you've knocked on doors at the clubs and tried to assess or tried to recruit, as it were?
It's the ratio, I'd say we are on 60-70. And it's an ongoing.
This is professional ranks
this
only, or you are measuring across the board?
And also in the MFC, we cater for the first division as well. Much to that, the scope of the organization has also expanded, where we are reaching out to the amateur level, and we are slowly but surely.
There's a lot of issues there in the amateur ranks.
We're gradually building, And I mean, if you look at it this way, if we start to really build these players, and enhance them with the necessary information, we empower them so that when they get to the higher level, they already are members of the organization. It makes the work much more better, because some of the challenges you face is that you sometimes recruit people who were not really activists, or we just love playing football and we weren't really paying attention to
Correct.
a lot of political issues that affects the game, such that we are professional footballers and we don't even know the laws and rules that encompasses the game that we grace on a daily basis. So if it comes at that level, you could call it some sort of a political school, because if you catch them at that particular level, we teach them about contracts, we speak to them about the financial literacy, and we tell them about the gains that are outstanding that we need to fight for. It becomes a continuity when they get to the next level. We don't have to introduce ourselves to a player that is already 29, who's just signed a contract, who never knew what are the functions of the union. So that coordination aspect, I think, creates a big dichotomy, because it must be, I think, dealt with at the junior level in order for us to get there, so that the agenda is a continuous thing and not something that stops and starts.
Are you comfortable with having competition? I ask this because there's been a lot of unions mushrooming everywhere. Who's genuine? Who's the if I'm a club or I'm a player or an agent that's looking to get my player registered to be part of a union, who do I go to? Because in my writing and broadcast career, to be honest, I've only really known SAFPU, but over the years, I've heard that, oh no, there's a union that approached the club about this or approached so and so, and then they tend to argue that they are offering different services to what a SAFPU that's been there for over a decade now, what they bring to the table. So how Lalwana, the union, why can't you come together and be under one umbrella? Why, as I'm talking to you now, I know SAFPU and I know two other unions, and one of them might have been a breakaway of SAFPU from what I understand as well.
It becomes a very tricky situation, and in my view, Mazola, such issues, unfortunately, they also divide the football agenda. I mean, if you look at SAFPU, we need no introduction. The work that we've done over the years speaks for themselves, Over the years, we've been recovering 10, 12, 15 million of the players' monies from the violation of contracts. We've educated hundreds of players, where we have qualified attorneys, where we have players who are professional psychologists in curatorship now, who's doing his PhD in terms of that, and many other qualifications in building the capacity from SAFPU. I speak about people who are in the industry of football, like your Pumuzo Manenje, who would have been given that opportunity to be educated with their coaching badges to ensure that their analysis in football becomes proper and sound.
100%.
Obri Matibe, as the goalkeeper coach at Kaizer Chiefs, your Dylan Shepherds, your Benson Mhlongos, Happy Cheles, they've got D's and C licenses. Mike Mayambela has just done his A in Lesotho.
Brilliant.
We've been contributing throughout, including your Mark Haskins. The list is endless if I am to talk about this. And we supported even at the UFRP. So it shows the passion that we've had, in terms of many things that we would be able to do and build capacity. And at this point in time, what's more important is to tackle other issues that are contained in the CBA that remain challenges. You cannot delete the history of 27 years and believe that something new will beat what we have at this particular point, especially with the CBA in place and the results of the work that we have done. The unfortunate thing that you talk about is the mindset of people breaking away, when they're not re-elected, lack the discipline to really be true to the situation and the conditions, that the players would have taken a decision that they don't want to keep you in the next term. Then you start to open your own union. For me, I don't think it's about serving the interests of the players. It gets very painful when it becomes the issue of bread and butter, the politics of the stomach, ensuring that there is some sort of a thing that you are carrying. SAFPU offers free legal service, amongst the things that we do. So I don't want to really comment a lot about what else has been built on the other side. They have a responsibility to do and follow the dreams as they believe it. They probably carry their own vision, which you said is they presented it to be as different. And we have so many players in the country, and if they feel that is the space they need to go in, players must look at the work and really decide for themselves who they want to affiliate it with. But some of these things are really questionable. If you have a new union that has been formed And the president of that particular union played football and retired without being a member of a union. And all of a sudden, after football, you are this person that cares about the interests and rights of the players. When you could not build the current structure that was there to ensure that football issues.
He's asking people to follow him in what he didn't believe in.
It's exactly the contradiction that you pick up, but it's not my place to really delve deeper into the other things. I think SAFPU is autonomous, we are relevant and we've been there, and the service that we've given, without fail, has been great, and we continue, to carry on with the fight.
Does this slow down your progress and the strides that you've made? Because I remember even I used to write columns hammering SAFPU in the early days, saying, they only appear when there are issues. But over the years, I've seen, and I'm not saying this because you're here, but, we see even our relationship has become better. You and I used to be at each other's throats now and again. But because of the strides that you are making, the relationship has improved. The players are coming to the party. So when these others mushroom, does it slow down your progress?
No, I wouldn't say it slows down the progress of SAFPU. But it sort of hinders and brings a lot of unnecessary confusion within the football agenda. When you are educating and uniting players into one goal, one vision, one country, one union, and something else happens, obviously it will catch the attention of the other players. And you must remember that the person who formed the other union is a former deputy secretary general of this union. So some of the relations that he would have built were from SAFPU. As he started as a recruitment officer, there was these interrelations with the players moving into a leadership position. So within every industry, there are those people who are sometimes loyal to the person more than the institution. So you don't expect that some members will not really step aside and focus on being loyal to an individual. That has happened. We've seen it as well. But the core, of the players are true to form, and they remain, resilient, and they are convinced that SAFPU is the union of choice. If our General Assembly, which is known as the NEC, in our terms, in June that took place, to pass a number of resolutions and to also amend the structure in how we move forward. We had an overwhelming majority in that particular conference, and we were not shy to express that. That gives you an indication of how much confidence players have on this organization. So we're not really worried about anything, and we will continue to really deliver on the work that we ought to do.
Speaking on that, the work that you ought to do, a couple of years ago, then President Simba Marumo went to the PSL, presented an agreement that had been reached, collective bargaining agreement. Maybe for the benefit of our viewers and listeners as well, explain what that entails. And how far have you gotten in that? Because there were question marks in terms of whether this would introduce minimum wage, better contracts for players, the welfare of players would improve by some margin. So maybe let's delve into that conversation about the CBA.
Okay. I think first I must just highlight that I don't want the work, just as I am the Secretary General, whatever work is being done, as much as I'm one of them, leaders at the helm, it becomes the work of an organization. It's not an individual that must be given the praise as much as we have leaders. So the CBAs that have been signed, SAFPU signed 2 CBAs, since the 2012, where President, the former, as you mentioned, was still the president, and Nhlanhla Shabalala was the Secretary General of the organization. Collectively with the leadership, that's exactly what we took to the PSL. And it looked to improve the conditions of employment. Yes, one of the things that would have been highlighted in that, it was the issue of the wages of the players, because we look into that. Knowing very well that we are seasonal players. And when you're a seasonal player, seasonal workers, and when you're a seasonal worker, our work is based on the contracts that we sign. And it's short term, sometimes it can be longer. But in the interim, how do we ensure that what we earn is worth the living, and it also gives us the livelihood that we deserve as players?
Correct.
It would
That's
have been
important,
part of what needed to be discussed. And the CBA holistically needed to look at the conditions of employment. He needed to look at the regulatory framework of things in whether everybody complies with that. It needed to look at the shape and form of the standard contract in how it has to be, to ensure that the players' rights are protected. Because, the ongoing fight that that was there, it has always been that the contract seems to favor more the employer more than the employee, where there are a number of obligations.
There are still some contracts that are like that,
given to the players. And when you look at the club's obligation, it's just to pay the salary of the player and ensure that there's training that is there and look after the logistics of traveling and the hotel. But it does not speak much about the recourse should the team, violate the contractual material, conditions of the contract in respect to the player. So that protection needed to be found in there to ensure that there's balance that comes from that. And the second CBA that would have been signed as an amplification of the first one, because yes, the greatest results that it came with the coordination with the league as well as FIFA, and it was to ensure that we have a compliant National Dispute Resolution Chamber, which still stands today, and it has improved immensely. And that is the great work, I think, that we need to really commend the Premier Soccer League for taking that direction in ensuring that justice is fair and equal for everybody.
They recently even announced a number of new panel members, independent panel members that are going to be part of the decision making in resolving those disputes.
Yes, indeed. Because if I must just go into the CBA in relation to the National Dispute Resolution Chamber, and for those who don't really know the term, the National Dispute Resolution Chamber is simply the court of football which has been established, and FIFA deals with global issues, okay, and you don't want a system where everything that happens within the country is taken to FIFA, because it could take 2 to 3 or 4 years. At that point in time, there are matters that are unresolved. The issue of the clearances, sometimes players are held hostage by that situation as it awaits a decision on who's right or who is wrong, including the compensation part. SAFPU previously also referred some of the matters to CCMA and also Labour Court. There's an example that had taken place where your Mpoma Likas and the Torombos against the Free State Stars, as I recall. It was taken to the Labour Court, and that case took 3 to 4 years before they actually
the contract even outlives that waiting period.
Sometimes you even retire whilst waiting for that. So it's the speedy resolution in terms of that becomes very key, so that your career keeps on moving, because you are not a permanent worker who's going to resolve issues 15 years later while we are still secured in terms of the job security. So those are the aspects that it looked at to say, what do we then do speedily? That also ensures that these matters are dealt with quickly, because we need to do it at home. But whatever we did, we couldn't just thumbsuck. It needed to actually comply with how FIFA runs its NDRC, and the recommendations that they put forward. And all the boxes were ticked. So at this point in time at home, we are getting a lot of joy, through that structure, and there's lots of representation at that level, and the fairness is there. And SAFPU now, as the players, we, unlike previously, we have appointed also 5, representatives appointed by SAFPU. So there's a voice from, the clubs, but there's also the voice from the players, which is the union. Now it brings at least that balance in terms of that, and we can trust that all decisions that are taken are properly scrutinized and they are fair and just for the sake of the players and justice.
Do you have a number of foreign internationals signed up for SAFPU? Because I'm asking this in relation to the National Dispute Resolution Chamber, because a lot of PSL clubs have been banned. It's almost half the amount of top flight clubs that have been banned by FIFA for. And it's at times when I look at the rulings, I look at it, I said, this can easily be resolved at a national level. It didn't have to go there. What is SAFPU's role in that? Or simply because the player is a foreign national, they decide they have their agents and then they want to take a speedy approach of going directly to FIFA, which, by the way, in my opinion, seems to always, and you can correct me whether this is right or wrong, to be more on the side of the player, that the player's rights are not violated as per their statutes. I don't know if my question is making sense.
Yeah, not that your question insinuates that there is no speedy approach at the end. Not that it insinuates
No.
but yes, players have a right to choose their own representation, okay, who must look into their affairs insofar as litigation is concerned. As much as we have members and we offer that service, without pay, sometimes there are players that prefer to take the advice of their agents based on what agents have, on the relations that they have in relation to that. So some of them listen to their parents and some of them take their own decision. And SAFPU doesn't really have much control over that. But I think based on the practice that have been there, the trust has always been that the international players, foreign players would take their matters to FIFA. And I think that is the precedence that they are carrying on with that, because the NDRC is very compliant to deal with those matters and actually give the same decisions that FIFA gives. But I think it's based on the advice that they get and they take them elsewhere. I mean, some of the incidents, we might not even know about them because from the point of inception to a player speaking to the agent, then the matter is taken to FIFA. We'll just read about an award that has been given in terms of Team A and Team B against this player. And there's not much that you can do if the matter has not been given to SAFPU to really attend and deal with. So that's just the nature of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a ballpark figure on the number of disputes that you probably deal with, I don't know, on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis? Because you did mention at times the amounts that you can be able to recover in terms of unpaid salaries. Would you have a breakdown of how many disputes that you most likely to deal with in a season or in a year?
It's a lot. It differs. I think the busiest time would be the window period when it's open. That just as the season begins, and also in the January window.
Is this because of signing on fees?
It's, I don't know. It's a lot of things that happen. But it's mainly because some teams have taken a different direction. Some others want to bolster their squad. There are players that they deem.
Then in comes in terminations and
all of that.
Yeah.
The only challenge with that is that the process is not fair and just to the players, because there must be that consultative process. Just as me as a player, I engaged with the team when we signed the contract. So if the team wants or expresses a desire not to have me anymore, that requires an engagement, and it must not be a forced engagement. We must all submit our reasons and find, common ground to settle on. And what we have seen a lot more that has been happening is that teams would enforce the decision unilaterally to terminate these contracts, and that becomes a violation. As a result, we then deal with those matters.
So there's nothing wrong with terminations. It's the process of termination.
Yes, you cannot force a team to keep a player that they don't want. So, because then it doesn't really make sense. They need to make way for any other player. But the process of the, termination or the proposed termination, it needs to be fair. There must be that engagements and consultation, and it must not include elements of victimization, and discrimination in relation to that. It must speak about the merits, and it's very attainable to really part ways amicably, because in some instances, where we've intervened to negotiate on behalf of the players, you'd be surprised that 40 or 50% of those matters were resolved without us having to go the legal route, because we stem a proper understanding of where things ought to be. It just becomes a bit more difficult when there's that approach that is very aggressive and intimidating towards the players because of their respect for clubs and the chairmen. They see them as father figures, and sometimes some of them
it's
are not
difficult
really,
to engage.
Yes, and some are not equipped to really handle these negotiations, and unfortunately others do, because they might lack information or they are given the agents in dealing with those issues, and they take wrong decisions. And when you come to us after that has happened, we can't turn that, because it would have been what you agreed to and what you have signed. So the relations work better. We have resolved many issues, as it were. I think in a month, if it's the most, you could deal with 30, 40 to 45 of those matters.
That's already too much, though.
So on average, in a month, it's just outside the window period, you are looking at 20 or even more. It just depends on how many people are really naughty in respect of the contractual violations. So annually, it can be 50, 70, even 100. The number is not really defined. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that we recover, it shows that the violations are still happening quite more than they should. But somehow the situation has improved.
But you'd prefer not to be this busy in terms of, you'd rather be handling other affairs other than disputes. How do you see it? Because I feel like the busier SAFPU are in dealing with disputes, it's bad for football that there are so many disputes that you have to go to clubs and try to get players, get their settlement, follow the right procedure in terms of termination of contracts, and just both parties abiding by the law and the what's written in the contract and making sure that there are no breaches involved.
Look, I would like to have coffee and structure something different that is progressive for the players, whether it's starting a business or a foundation to ensure that we build community champions where it can be an enforcement of the financial literacy aspect, whatever it is that at least will secure their livelihood. I think it would serve us better if we don't take the legal route, because let me be honest with you, we don't like litigating. First of all, litigating is very expensive. I mean, it sometimes threatens the existence of the organization, because you'd find...
Yeah, I was about to ask, if your advice is free of charge, how do you stay afloat as SAFPU?
It's exactly where the point that I'm getting at. And it threatens the existence if you look into that, because you can't pick and choose which issues you need to deal with. Whatever is brought there, you speak to the player, there's a consultation, you agree on a process, having given him the advantages and disadvantages as you see them. But you will take all the matters, and lawyers work, and if they work, there's money that must be paid towards those lawyers. And eventually, if you don't really change the situation, you'll find yourself having an organization that is run by lawyers because you owe them so much money, you can't really get out of anything. We also need to ensure that the finances are protected, which is why the mediation issue becomes very key and important to resolve many matters. Because if I tell you, most of these issues are not that complicated. It's just the approach in how these things are dealt with. And most teams have also realized that, okay, the union is resolving a number of these matters because it costs us and it also costs the clubs. There are costs that comes within that, including the payments. Because if I must just give you a quick example, you'd find that the player is left with 18 months in his contract, and all he requires is 6 months, and the team offers him 2 months. I mean, if you're looking at that, it simply means that with the 16 months that's remaining on my contract, I'm only taking 2 months, and the team gets to save 14 months. And they are firing me, and I don't have employment secured elsewhere, and I don't have the financial security elsewhere. What kind of a decision would I be taking if I really accept this kind of a thing? I'm asking for 6 months. It gives me time. I will work, deal with the program. Until the window period, this money can sustain me. I believe in my abilities and I'll get employment elsewhere. Players are very reasonable in most of these situations. But simply because of that engagement that is not really done, to the best of their abilities.
Clubs want their way.
Honestly, yes. In some of them that do that, it ends up costing them so much money, because now we must go to the 16 times the salary, including, the interest that comes with that, and the lawyer's fees and all of that. And it creates a problem. And just to sidestep, just recently we won a case against JDR where we got a balance of a contract. I'm not going to mention the name of the player, but they terminated unfairly, the contract. No, in fact, it was due in payables. And they owed him so much money, and we terminated with just cause, and they're accepting the repudiation on the matter.
So they hadn't paid him for several months.
It was about 3 or 4 months, and he kept
triggering just cause.
And we even, intervened to say, can we try and deal with this? We know that there are challenges sometimes, but you must show at least an effort towards resolving this. But unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. Now, the case that we have won is costing the team around 600,000 rands for one player.
Yeah.
What does this mean in a big scheme of things? And we are talking them with SAFPU Foundation Championship. It simply means at any particular
That's more than
month,
their grant, actually.
Exactly. At any particular month, there'll be about 600,000 rands of the money that is going to be deducted from the grant. Then it means the other 25, 30, 35 players that are within the team, there is now a problem, a challenge of salary payments. And if this continues, they end up bringing the case to SAFPU and we are now litigating. As a result, that also looks at, it seems as if we are destroying football. But that's why I say we can't be selective in who we help and how we help. That is why we always feel mediation will assist us to avoid these type of situations. And unfortunately, sometimes we have no choice but to ensure that we deliver justice for the players.
Yeah, exactly. You can't pick and choose your cases because you do offer those services as well. How is your relationship with clubs then? And how important is it in these instances? Because on the one hand, you might be dealing with helping an individual, but you've had cases last season where you had to deal with the Moroka Swallows situation. Recently, you've had to deal with the Royal AM situation. It's a while, and you can obviously educate us on this. Not all the players at those clubs were members. But how do you then take up that case collectively to help the players get their salaries, their contracts be honored? Negotiations with the club chairman, the club bosses as well, to come to the party to make sure that, as you were saying, it doesn't look like SAFPU are trying to destroy football or are telling players, stay away, don't report for training or whatever. And is that a cause of action that you take at times for players to down tools? Because sometimes clubs just don't listen. Do you tell players, because I'm not getting paid, why should I rock up for a training session ahead of a big fixture, whether Motsepe Foundation or Betway Premiership?
There has been that consideration of downing tools in some few instances where players themselves are the ones. It's not SAFPU that is advising players. I think we must give credit to these players to know that they are aware when their rights are violated. They exercise the necessary patience with the teams. They are reasonable throughout the process, but when they feel they're just being misled for a longer period of time, they grow frustrated. And they would come with hints of that nature to say we must then tools down. And SAFPU comes through and we look at this particular issue and speak about it together, about the implications and how we can then approach it. We don't just do that in isolation without consulting with the club to say, there's this situation that is here. Can you find a way of ensuring that we avoid this particular thing?
But do you speak to players in a group or those who are your members? How do you go about it?
It's in a group form because just like the Moroka Swallows players, we dealt with the matters virtually because you remember December they weren't paid, January there was this limbo that they found themselves in. Others could not travel back to the country. So you don't do things that are discriminatory based on the situation and circumstances that players find themselves in, where there's a meeting with 7 players. Just because physically they are in Johannesburg and the rest of the others would have gone
scattered all around.
So we dealt with those issues collectively where we spoke with all the players. And as much as we have the majority of the members in Moroka Swallows, you are quite correct. Not all the players were members of SAFPU, but it doesn't mean SAFPU can't represent them. We've represented so many players who had challenges who have not been members of SAFPU until a point where they meet their current problems and we've resolved them and they join and they're happy with the work. So Swallows players, they gave a power of attorney. You can still give SAFPU the power of attorney to represent you on these matters. And that's exactly where it started. Unfortunately, as the situation always is the reality, it's out of the 35 or 40 players, others would have gone with a lawyer that was recommended by the agent and so forth and so forth. So that also separated and divided the process because they had one charge and it was a collective charge on everybody else.
Exactly.
So it would have been fair.
So it seemed counterproductive to,
It hinders the process in a way. I think it would have been a great thing if the process was centralized so that we deal with one merits that of the case amongst all the other players, so that if they are all found guilty, then they must fire all the 40 players and we'll deal with them in that respect. But because of, a lot of interferences and also players making their own judgment in their own wisdom, understanding that they took a different path. We ended up with 22 players in that particular case. And we went through a DC, we represented them. And the team, after the whole process, they would have reworked the relations with the players and continued with them. And we had 4 or 5 that were left outside the door. And it's key that you mentioned that part. Out of the players that were out there, we have taken their matter. I mean, contrary to what everybody said, they said we crazy as SAFPU. We are misleading players to take a strike, and these players never even went on strike. These players were not given, an order to go and play the game. These players reported at the game, on the day of the game, wearing the regalia, carrying their equipment because they wanted
to play,
an engagement. They wanted a confirmation and the security to say these are the issues that will be addressed. And once that is done, they would play the game. But the team opted to take the direction otherwise and pin it on the players. I mean, we have won that case, Mazola. We've just received an award at the closure of the year that the players have not went on strike illegally. And we had 3 players that we filed before that brought in their matters. SAFPU has won those cases of the players, and they are due to get the balances of their contracts, and the amount of money that they need to recover, it's in its millions. But the painful thing, which is part of life in any event, we don't have swallows anymore. We have Marumo
Gallants. Who takes responsibility for that?
You buy clubs as a going concern. That's just the true reality of that, and it's a cost that will have to be dealt with by Marumo Gallants on this particular one. But us being victorious at that, at least it shows even those that would have gone outside, the process that we proposed and appointed their own people and lost. I think one of them was Andy Lejali, would have opted to go a different route, and he lost the case, and I think he appealed and lost it. If I remember in terms of that, yes.
It was dismissed.
This just shows, gives up with the confidence, and the results are there. You see, this is exactly what would have happened. But we hope that we unite all footballers, because if you don't grow this union, the problems that we face will never be less. They will just increase if the attitude of the clubs doesn't change.
I don't want to preempt anything, but hopefully you don't see a similar scenario rearing its ugly head at Royal AM again, because there are similarities here, in as much as other things are different in the terms of how these disputes at the moment have been gone about. That the club also has come out. I wouldn't necessarily say they've been owning to their errors, but they just say, well, under curatorship, is that a first for SAFPU to deal with a club that's under curatorship, or it's happened in the lower division that in the media space it never hit the media space?
Maybe it happened before my time.
I not in your time.
No. I know there was once an issue with what is this team? It was in the Free State. I'll try and remember. And
the one that was Aziz.
Not FCAK.
Oh, not FCSK.
No, not FCAK. I'll try and remember. The status, I think, was later sold to Bay United or so. But I think there was something almost similar, but not so much as deep as this current situation. This becomes a very unique situation that we face, And first and foremost, above any other thing, in the Royal AM issue, our interest is the players, above everything else, but also because you can have the players and not have a team. That is a crisis. So it's a situation that you hope and you can give your support and contributions to ensure that the matter is salvaged so that the status of the team remains intact and the players' employment is secured and they continue to receive, their salaries. That's one thing that you are looking at, because it's quite complex when it is explained. I mean, this happens on the basis of private affairs of Fumam Kiz, the president of the club. And at the end of the day, the status is attached, which is not really clear how, because we understand that she's not part of that, as it were, in terms of the registered names.
Yes. Michael Murphy made it clear to us in 2021 when they bought the status that it was her sister, who's a doctor, I believe, whose name was on there and then linked to a family trust or something along those lines.
Something along those lines. So with all of that happening, and there's a curatorship that is also appointed, and the appointment of that particular person, as we understand it, is to ensure that they preserve the situation, as a going concern, and not really to hinder and destroy the process, because we are talking livelihoods here. These are real life issues, and based on the advice and guidance that was given and the agreements, it was that the money must be released to ensure that the players are paid their salaries. But that did not happen. I think it becomes a legal dispute based on maybe a difference of opinion in terms of the approach that would have been taken. But it put this situation where it was now. What do you then do? And as SAFPU, our interest is ensuring that players' jobs are secured, the club is saved, so that players have employment, but also to deal and protect the gains, that the PSL has made to be the league that they are today, and any other matter can be dealt with after that. So it requires collaboration and discussions between the PSL and ourselves as it has happened, and also the team in finding out what is the situation. How do we then deal with it? Because we also have a responsibility to report back to those particular players. And at this point, it really matters not whether at Royal AM we have 100% membership or not. The most important thing is that we deal with this particular issue, safe football, and all other matters can really be dealt with in the past. I mean, you saw the statement we released that we also expressed the interest to also, place our submissions before the curator on behalf of the players, because that's what we are pleading for. And they would have had their meetings, and I think the matter is under control at this point. The players were paid as far as last week. They are back at training. But you don't want a situation where it becomes a month-to-month.
Exactly. That's where I was going with this.
Yes, because that lies on the anxiety of the players, the job security aspect, the depression, the mental welfare. It's a very, very big
it's key,
issue when you look into this matter. And also that they get depressed. Football is not then enjoyable. How do we then get the best product out of the team that is going to feed the national team of this country? So it's all of those things that you really take into consideration, Mazola, because as a union, people expect that you are just going to write and lambast and go, but you understand the facts. You see the beauty about us, unlike other people who are less informed, who are trying to be relevant, who went on platforms and started saying all things that don't make sense. It doesn't really help and assist football. It makes them remain as people who want to be relevant and gain traction. We are past that stage. So we understood the merits and everything, and we did everything also in our power to contribute as little as we can to put the situation at ease. And right now, that's where we are. Continuity, we need to ensure that it's sealed and there's a secure environment, at least until the end of the season. Then the matter can then be relooked at.
And that's another thing I like about SAFPU as well, that engaging behind the scenes and issuing statements after establishing the facts, instead of, because even some of us, when we are writing these stories and we seek comment, oftentimes you find that I can't comment until I understand what's happening behind the scenes. But just to wrap up our conversation, and when we're talking about disputes and clubs not paying and this and that, I wanted to dive into the conversation about minimum wage. But can we even get there, SG, if clubs are breaching contracts and they are, the majority of them failing to pay players at times? Can we even begin to have that conversation, and what would it even look like? And then that brings us also, I think it measures nicely with your fight for around tax issues, especially for footballers in our country.
Oh yeah. How do I put this? The issue of the minimum wage has been there for years.
Is there a minimum wage? Is it in black and white, or it's just
there isn't. There isn't, and I'll tell you why. And I hope that players will get to watch this show and also understand that a collective voice and understanding of the challenges that we face as footballers. If we pay interest in football matters, not just playing football only, there's so much more that we can do when we are united. But if we are scattered and we don't really delve deeper into the agenda of football, it becomes a bit more problematic to really move as a collective voice. And I think that has been the challenge over the years, where we needed to, SAFPU was also in tatters at some point. Us coming into the leadership, it was very painful at some point. One was not really given much time to learn the trade. It was hitting the ground running and learning the issues with the number of crises that were there. At some point, I remember I wanted to run away and just focus on playing football because I still had a team and I had a salary, and Why not be comfortable
was the
and
easier
get
thing
into
to do,
this? It
yeah.
was just the passion for the work, and the players, as it were. But with that said, the situation improved over the years. We are better right now in terms of the football agenda as footballers. But when we also look at these things and also the discussions with the clubs, and all stakeholders involved, it builds your understanding of things, and we must not succumb to the pressure of what the public expects us to say without thoroughly, analyzing the situation and understanding the merits. I know we've advocated for that, and it's also contained within the CBA's other items that we need to really look and deal with. But the question I then ask to you, Mazola, and the public at this point, not that we are, diverting from our responsibilities as the union, because people want us to be militant and radical at all costs. and that is not how you approach things in life.
Yes.
The first division state at this point in time, with them struggling to pay these salaries, if we are to propose what we did, because there's a survey, that was conducted over the years with the players, and they gave us, and it was in 2015, where they said NFD minimum wage, they are calling for 15,000 rands. PSL minimum wage, they are calling for 35,000 rands, as it were, and that was back then. Okay. Now, with the grant, there is 500,000 rands that will be paid to clubs to run the operations. It's for traveling, it's for accommodation.
In the second tier, yeah.
Where does that put this argument, that this particular point in building the brand that is football? It's one thing that we need to talk about, not lessening what the players want. We still push and we want that. But I think we need to be really reasonable and look at the challenges that we face. We have issues of sponsorship. In football, that becomes a bit of a problem. If you look at rugby, if you look at cricket, they have no issues of this nature. In football, we even struggle to have investors in buying teams to keep them within the league. And if they do, they struggle to ensure that the operations are catered for. So if we start to call for numbers, which is something we have not done at this point, it's still at an advisory level as we discuss.
Yeah.
What does it do to a team that is in the NFD when players must get a minimum of 15,000 rands and their team has 30 players within the books? And at the same time, they need to travel, they need to accommodation, they need to cater for all operations that encompasses the football clubs. If the chairman does not have enough funds on his reserves, we run within the very same situation of these contractual breaches. And we will then be litigating these teams and taking so much more money from them to a point where we exhaust football ourselves. I think this issue becomes very deep. As much as we want it, players deserve to earn so much more, because
there's so many layers to this conversation of minimum wage.
Exactly. So players need to earn so much more. One, our careers are short. What we have is a special talent. We are not just general workers. These are special people, playing the game that unites countries, unites religions, and we are healers of souls everywhere. See, therapy, but how?
That's true.
How so does this disadvantage us when we bring healing to others, but we are drowning and suffering, in our own sorrow that is perpetuated by the game that we love, that heals everybody else? It really contradicts the principles of humanity if you look at it from that perspective. But what is it that we are calling for if we do? And is this the right time? Stakeholders in football, we need to really unite. Sponsorship, private sector. We need investors in football so that these issues become issues of the past, so that we grow the game in terms of what has to happen. Yeah. And we will not shy away from these discussions. We will still have them, we'll still push them. But at the end of the day, we want to also contribute, to the solutions that ensures that the product that we are proposing, the players get it, and the conditions are better suitable for them to have that, so that football is sustainable and they also live the quality lives that they need to live. That's exactly where this situation is, Mazola. It's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from this conversation is that it's another decade of getting to a minimum wage number. The discussion is happening, but it's another decade.
No. Sorry. I don't think it will be that long, but it's also possible. And until we all unite and really bring healing to this particular matter, then there is. Because if you look at the gap between the PSL and the NFT, it's humongous. Where the
500,000 for Motsepe Foundation, just a little bit over 2 million for top flight clubs.
Yes.
Phew, the discrepancy,
But also the advantage, even there in the Premier, it's not all the teams that have sponsors. It's
Correct.
probably not more than
It's a
7.
handful, yeah.
It's still a challenge because we want to run this football better, It's still a bit of a challenge. Even though there is this grant and the league is really contributing to ensuring that it grows the game and it assists the teams. But this sponsorship becomes, I think, a discussion that must be had, because at this particular point in time, those that are high earners, which is why sometimes journalists, I don't know, sometimes within intolerable information, where you are told there's a player in South Africa that is earning 450,000 or 500,000 rands. There is no such a thing. If you look at a team in the PSL that gets a grant of 2.5 million, if we put it that way, if the one earns 500,000 rands, what happens to the 35 that are in the team? What then happens with the logistics, the operations, all other factors that must be put in there? I'm sure if a sponsor really gives a lot of money and players at one particular team earn that amount of money, it means they are probably forking in about 35 million rands a month into one club. Is that a reality? No, that's not the reality. So sometimes this reporting also puts pressure on these players because sometimes they told they squandered all the money when they weren't even earning enough.
Yeah.
And others have the pressure to try and live to the expectations based on what the society reports and commit to things that are much more, bigger than they can afford in life. So it's that balance needs to be really, really found in terms of that. But we need a much more stronger league.
No, I hear you. And I'm not one of those who reports about salary figures. I don't know what players earn. But
have you not seen my contract when I played back in the day?
No, I don't remember.
I'll show you one day.
Let's wrap it off with your fight for, we spoke about tax. I think top of the show you were talking about tax and how to go about that, because it shouldn't, like you say, special talents and seasonal careers, as it were. So should it be applied that the tax bracket should be the same? I feel like this could also drag on for quite a while to convince the South African Revenue Services to buy into your vision.
Yes. It's you are quite correct in that. It has dragged, as a matter of fact. I mean, our submission started when Fikile Mbalula was the Minister of Sports. There was a Lekgotla. There were discussions there, and there were promises that this matter will be taken to Parliament for deliberation, and nothing happened. There was no feedback in respect to that. He moved out. There's been so many ministers, I can't keep track. I know there was Mamko Tozile Klasa. I know there was Natim Tetu.
That's how long this conversation has been going.
It has been. And we were, I think, making progress with the former minister whom we had engaged with, Uzizugodwa, on this. And he really feels it's something that is worth pursuing at that particular point in time, And the complications of this matter also comes with the fact that as much as you lobby the Minister of Sports, there must be treasury that is brought into this and SARS on this very same issue. And we are not crazy. We would not push for this if we don't think it's doable. And if South Africa is the first country to achieve this, not only for footballers, but for sports people, let it be. We can't wait for things to be done elsewhere and only for us to go and copy, just like the TV shows that you see today. There's American what wives, and then there's South Africa. It's not how it has to work. Somehow we need to lead the agenda and really go out there and get our gains.
Correct.
And
so what exactly are you asking for, SG?
What we're asking for is that as footballers, we play short-term careers. We are taxed a lot of money, unfortunately, especially for the high earners. I mean, we've said this, that tax doesn't look at the career in how it has been designed. It looks at the amount you receive, it looks at the bracket, then the deduction goes. But this might be a 6-year contract that I have as a footballer. And if you are going to take from my 100,000 rands on a monthly basis, 45,000 rands for 6 years, that I'm not going to get back. You see people that work in private sector and anywhere else, they work and they go on pension, they recover something from that particular money. It's like they've invested into this where they get pension money. We don't have that as footballers. it becomes a big challenge when it comes to that. So the proposal that we make, there are stories that are there. The players after football, they have nothing, to fall back on.
Yes.
But can then the country, the society, the general public, and everybody else contribute in being part of the solution in ensuring that at least this thing is achieved, so that if they are taxed a particular amount, even if it's 20%, if you're on 45% bracket, is taken and it's saved, and there is a pension fund scheme that is open there for all the players, which becomes then compulsory. It makes exiting football less painful, where players need to really go and find themselves in the second phase of their lives, because the reality, as much as any simple person would say they need to be educated, everybody else works, everybody else does that. We are not designed in that way. Some of us, we are practical people. There are things that we would need to do on that aspect. Others, education is not really their thing. Others might be passionate about business, but the career we have and what we earn and what is taken away from us doesn't give us an opportunity to even save enough and also, sponsor the very same business ideas that we have. We want a solution into this. And it's not only to government, even those people in the financial sectors who really can assist us in remodeling this particular aspect. We have the document we've written of the approach that we think can be taken, and that's why we are engaging the higher powers in terms of the minister in relation to this, and treasurer, whom we hope that we would have a meeting about this so that we can pick each other's brains to actually contribute in being a solution to sports people, because it's not only soccer, rugby, it's short-lived, cricket and all other structures. Yeah. But I believe and I understand that rugby players don't have such issues, as they have a scheme that is running, and this is based on the privilege of the sponsorships that they have in terms of that particular.
Put this in place.
Football, you introduce it with what you have right now, and you are still taken away from the players. They will not leave and just contribute to savings, and that's not how life has to work.
Yeah. Well, look, Minister Gayton McKenzie seems like he's a guy who's got an open door policy. Maybe just slide it under his door a little bit there and see what happens.
We've sent correspondence, and yes, his energy also, fuels us, and he seems to be an implementer. He's been in the space, not shy to speak about issues, and he's very passionate. I mean, just recently he was also talking about former footballers or former sports people that are left destitute. He wants to really do something for them and for their dignity. But what we are saying is that, can we then, as much as that is good, can we not wait until it gets there for us to give handouts or some sort of a program that wants to uplift those who would have been underground for a number of years? We want to actually ensure that we don't get there by finding solutions for now, to ensure that we preserve the dignity and the livelihoods of these current players and sports people in general.
No, absolutely, SG. Any last bites as we close it off? I think we've covered most of what I would love to, and I know we could go another hour just delving into the welfare of players and what SAFPU's vision is for players and football in our country in general.
I think I've spoken too much. I think there's this saying that says a little done well is much. And I think maybe I will stick with those words for today. But just a call for players to unite, under the banner of this organization, and ensure that we build, the strongest union in the country, the strongest leading union in Africa, as we affiliate with also international bodies. Let us ensure that we're a great example and we grow football, and we also pave the way for the youngsters that are still at grassroots level at this point in time, so that when they come to the structures of professionalism, they find the right structures that we would have put in place and fought for as the footballers. At least let us contribute to the gains of the game for the future generations, and that's what we call for. SAFPU remains resilient, honest, obedient, militant, in our approach in terms of ensuring that we deliver on the mandate given by the footballers in South Africa.
I like that, militant. Okay, let's close it off there, SG. Catch our next episode, the first one of the year, 2025, Behind the Boot with Super Geno. Like I said, I barely even looked at my notes. The conversation was that good with Secretary General of the South African Football Players Union, Nhlanhla Shabalala.